Where did priests come from? I think sometimes people think that priests are born a priest, like pop out of the mother's womb. I bless you, right? Or they think that, priests come from the sky, from heaven, like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Terminator movies. There's a big smoking crater, and then there's this priest standing there, and he's like, hasta la vista, Satan, right? My name is Father Andrew Trapp. I'm a Catholic priest, 29 years old. This is my story, and like all good stories, it involves a girl, it involves some good food, some adventure. So I was born in Aiken, South Carolina, the vast metropolis of Aiken, a few, 30,000 people. We've got a few stoplights, and I was just a normal American kid. Just like y'all grew up. I loved Ninja Turtles. I loved He-Man. Anybody remember He-Man? Yeah. Masters of the Universe. I love Transformers. Now Transformers are coming back. And playing with my friends outside, like riding bike all over the neighborhood and stuff. And so at the end of 4th grade, I thought life was great. And then one day my parents come and they say, Andrew, we got something to tell you. What? We're going to send you next year to St. Mary's. You're going to send me to St. Mary's? What? That was the local Catholic school. And I didn't want to go to St. Mary's. I was at Aiken Elementary. I loved it there. I was like about to be in 5th grade, like the king of the school, right? Masters of elementary school. And all my friends were there. And so I was very mature. I was like, Mom, Dad, I don't want to go to St. Stupids, right? Like that. And so, Blessed Mother, forgive me. And so they, thankfully, my parents knew better than I did. They sent me to St. Mary's. And I didn't like it at first, but then I started to like the friends and get to know people and stuff. And I actually especially started to like religion class that we had every day. Instead of just once a week on Sunday, we got to hear about Jesus every single day. And one week we watched this movie about this priest called Father Damien. He's also called the leper priest because he gave his life in the mid-1800s to go serve the lepers in Hawaii, where he was a missionary. And it's this really heroic story. I wish I could go all into detail about it. But this really inspired me, and I was like, whoa, I could be like an astronaut, I could be a NASCAR driver, I could be Spider-Man, I could do all these things with my life, but then all of a sudden I thought, you know what? I could be a priest. Maybe I could be a priest. And it kind of got my imagination going as a 5th grader. And I was even in Mrs. Waters' religion class, and she was talking a little while later about vocations, what God might be calling us to as grown-ups. And I remember I tapped this kid, Marcus, on the shoulder. I was in the very back corner. And I was like, Marcus, don't tell anybody, but I think I might want to be a priest. And what did Marcus do? Right? He just, told everybody. And so I ended up getting made fun of for the rest of the school year because don't play with us. We can't let you play, you priest or whatever. So I was like, oh man, Marcus, I'm going to kill you. But Mrs. Waters, of course, was like, oh, that's great, Andrew, that'd be great. And so I decided I'd keep this priest thing on the down low a little bit. And middle school came, and something very scary, crazy, unimaginable happened. I call it puberty, okay? All of a sudden, the girls didn't have cooties anymore, right? And I was like, what's the deal here? And all of a sudden I thought, maybe I can't be a priest because last time I checked, being a priest means you can't be married. And I think I'd like to have a wife and have kids and stuff. So by the time I got into high school, my parents sent me to the local Catholic high school, I had decided I don't think I can be a priest. Unless the Pope changes the rules or something, but barring that, there's no way I can be a priest. And so fast forward a few years to senior year of high school. And there I was at Fazoli's. Anybody been at Fazoli's? Italian food. If you go there, it's not so much anymore, but it used to be you'd go there and sit there and every 5 minutes somebody come around offering you free bread. I was the breadstick guy, and it was great for me because I got to get more outgoing, become more outgoing, talk to people, joke around. And one day, this girl, this is a Saturday night, in like my senior year, middle of the senior year. One day, this girl walks in. We'll call her Anne. She was this girl that I had this little crush on several years before in 8th grade when we were on the same like co-ed soccer team. I thought she was so cute with her little soccer shorts and cleats and everything. And then she went to the public school and I went to the Catholic school, so I hadn't seen her in all these years. And I'd like to say that the years had been very nice to her, if you know what I'm saying, okay? And so there she comes walking back in, and she's with another friend of hers, and they're hanging out. And so, wouldn't you know, I spent like a lot more time at that table than I did at the other tables, and we were talking and stuff, and we seemed to hit it off pretty well. So a few days later, I got up all my courage, and I said, Andrew, if you don't call her up, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life. You will forever question your manhood, all right? And so I called her up. I dialed her number. It's not like she gave me her number. I just looked in the phone book, right? Okay, so I called her up, and I said, Ann, would you by any chance want to go out next week and get like go to a movie or dinner or something? And she surprised me by actually saying yes. I mean, I wasn't really expecting that. I just figured I had to like ask for form's sake. She said yes, okay? And so it was like, woo, right? And we ended up going out. I took her to this very nice, fine dining of seafood. It's called Red Lobster. Anyway, they got those super tasty cheddar biscuits that we all love and adore. And we went afterwards to miniature golf, putt-putt. It's actually a lot of fun. If you've ever tried that on a date, it's a lot of, good, clean dating fun. And then after that, I drove her home, and I'm driving, and I realized all of a sudden, like, Andrew, you idiot. You didn't get her flowers, man. And so right then, we were driving by Walmart, and romantic man that I am, I like veered, into Walmart parking lot, parked the car, didn't tell her what I was going for, ran inside, got some cheap Walmart flowers, ran back out, and then gave it to her, and she was like, oh. And I was like, yeah. And so it was a great evening. And then as we were pulling into the driveway to drop her off at her house, it was that awkward moment. It's like, what do I do? What do I say? Do I try to kiss her goodnight? Or, do we high five? Or how does this work? And so, then I heard her say, Andrew, my door is stuck. Oh man, I was so mortified because I had this little really cruddy Toyota Corolla, right? My friends called it the clown car. And, it wasn't like the Stud Meister Deluxe car or nothing. And the bad thing is, every once in a while, just on its own, the passenger door would just decide not to open. And so, of course, like the Holy Spirit had come down in like an automobile Pentecost and sealed the door. No matter what happened, we couldn't get it open. I had to get out. I'm like yanking on it. She's pushing on it. And eventually, I'm thinking, what are her parents thinking if they're looking out the window? And finally, she has to do like a Dukes of Hazzard and just like crawl out the window. Oh yeah, it was great. And so that was my first date with her. And for the next few weeks, I thought things were going amazing. I got to take her to Aquinas, my high school, and show her off a little bit. And the guys were like, my last name is Trapp, so the guys were like, Trapp, you dog! And I was like, oh yeah, you know it, yeah. And so we were hanging out and dating and stuff for a while. For 3 weeks was like an eternity in high school at that point. I mean, that was like serious. That was for real, right? And so one day, though, it's like she never starts returning my phone calls, or she's always like washing her hair, that kind of thing. And I'm like, dude, what's going on? And finally, we are able to sit down and talk. And the gist of the conversation was, Andrew, I think you're awesome and stuff, and you're great, but as you know, I'm a Baptist, and you're a Catholic. And I don't think I could ever marry a Catholic. So I think it's best that we just not keep seeing each other. And I was devastated. I felt like I was a martyr for the faith, like right up there with that guy that got burned on the grill. And so, like, why was I being like turned down just because I'm Catholic. Why would that matter? If I'm Christian and you're Christian, we both love Jesus. Couldn't we get married one day and have a bunch of Christ-loving kids, What was the big deal? So we had to go our separate ways, but it ended up being an opportunity for me because I had this great plan in mind. I thought, this is like true senior year desperation talking, but I was like, I know what I'll do. I'll learn everything I can about being Catholic, the differences between a Baptist and a Catholic, and then I'll share all that with her. She'll want to become Catholic, and then we'll live happily ever after. It's foolproof. Nothing could go wrong, right? And so that's what I did. For the first time, I started to look online. I read on Catholic.com, with this Catholic Answers website, all questions and answers about everything that anybody's ever asked. Why do we love Mary so much? Why do we have a pope? What's this Eucharist thing? And I started reading different books, like by Scott Hahn, this great convert from Presbyterianism who became Catholic. And I just started devouring stuff. And for the first time, even though I'd had religion every single day since 5th grade, I never understood. What is the big deal? What's the big difference between a Catholic and a non-Catholic? I had just grown up in this little South Carolina town where there's about 100 different churches all saying they're Christian. Well, what's the big deal? What's the difference? And for the first time, I actually started to study and learn because I wanted to know. And not just because it was a class I had to take, like something I had to get a good grade in and that's it. And so I started to get on fire for my Catholic faith. For the first time, this blows my mind, but I never realized. I had always thought that it had been this way from the beginning, where you have the Baptist church, the Presbyterian church, the Methodist church, all these different churches all together. I thought it was always like that. And it was only when I started to read and learn that I realized, holy moly, right? We Catholics, we're the one true original church. We go all the way back to Jesus and the apostles. And all the other churches broke off within the last 500 years, pretty much. And that never hit until then. And so finally, I really started to get excited about being Catholic. And one day I was in Fazoli's again. So Fazoli's played a big role in all this. And late at night, there were these people, a bunch of young people my age, on a Saturday night, hanging out. It's about 10 o'clock. They're the only table there. And they were having this intense theological discussion, around pizza and everything. And it was like, well, what if you're a Christian and then you do something bad? Can you be saved? Well, what if you're baptized? Does that matter? Well, what if you do this and do that? Back and forth about salvation, and can you lose your salvation and everything like that. And so I was washing the tables, doing the busboy thing. I kept getting closer and closer and listening. I couldn't help it. So finally, I'm right next to their table. And I just kind of clear my throat when there's a pause. And I'm like, excuse me, have you ever considered the Catholic understanding of salvation? And they looked at me dropped open. They didn't know. They was like, this Fazoli's breadstick guy is hilarious, let me tell you. And so I said, you know what? We believe as Catholics that what matters is you have a relationship with Jesus Christ right now. And then when you die, if you die in a good relationship with God, then you're going to spend that way forever in heaven. And then if you die having rejected God, not wanting to be connected to God, then He respects that wish, and you stay away from Him, rejecting Him forever, and that's hell. And so what matters is that we die in union with God. And we ended up talking about different things. At one point, this one girl right next to me, she looks up and she says, in this thick Southern accent, I think purgatory is a crock, like that. And so I got to talk about purgatory to them. So anyway, we ended up talking for 45 minutes, 50 minutes. This was a big turning point for me, because for the first time I actually was talking about the faith to other people. And actually the manager was coming in, hey Andrew, you want to actually do some work here? And I was like, it's okay, I'll work off the clock, and just a little bit, it's okay, I'll make up for it. And so I was really starting to get on fire for Christ and for my Catholic faith for the first time. And then fast forward a little bit more, I go to Clemson University. Go Tigers! Yeah! Anybody a Tigers fan here? All right, I like it. And so I go to Clemson. I'm still figuring I can't be a priest. I wanted to be a high school teacher, because I figured that way I can still give my life to serving people And so I ended up going to Clemson. I started to date another girl who I really cared for a lot, and started to get involved with the Catholic organization and everything there, and started to spread the faith to people that were there. Like, there were these guys from Bob Jones University, which, if you haven't heard of it, is this really super anti-Catholic evangelical type school, fundamentalist school up near Clemson. And anyway, they'd send like a couple vanfuls of people every Friday and Saturday night to try to convert the poor pagans that were going out to get drunk every weekend, right? So they'd be out there trying to talk to everybody as they walk around. So, I mean, great. I love their zeal and everything. So my goal, my thing is, I ended up going and starting to like talk to them and try to counter-evangelize them. You know, it's like, have you accepted Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior? Yes. Well, but have you accepted the Church of Jesus Christ, which he founded, to share with you the truth? You know, stuff like that. And so we get into these discussions, and then it helped me to learn what I didn't know yet. So little by little, God was kind of working in my heart. And finally, what happened was, I was driving home my first year for Christmas break from Clemson down to Aiken. It's about a 2-hour drive through the countryside, nice quiet drive. And someone had given me this talk by this awesome priest. It was his conversion story. And so I'm all by myself. I put it, little tape. It wasn't even a CD. It was a cassette tape. You remember those, right? And so I put that in the car, and I'm driving. And this conversion story of his, it's really starting to seep in. And without going into all the details, he's got a really fascinating story. But he was always searching to be somebody. He was always searching to have this hole in his heart fulfilled. And it was only after all these different things that happened in his life, finally, he heard God's call to be a priest. He said yes. And it's in doing what God was calling him to do that he finally feels fulfilled and happy. That was his basic message that I got. And so I'm driving home, like, oh, that's interesting. It was starting to seep into my heart. And afterwards, there's this question and answers thing. And one of the questions was, what if you think you're called to be a priest, but you don't think you can handle the whole celibacy thing, not being married? I was like, wow, that's like exactly my situation. And I listened, and he didn't actually say any of this, but this is how the Holy Spirit kind of connected to my heart, is that if I was called to be a dad, to be a husband, you know, it'd be awesome. So many gifts. This great big treasure chest, like in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, you know, big, huge treasure chest with pieces of gold and pearls and stuff. So, you know, to be a dad, to have all kinds of awesome kids and teach them how to, like, ride their bike and play ball and, like, make armpit noises with, you know, all the good things that dads get to do. Man, I really want to be a dad. And to be a husband, to have the companionship of a wife, to have sex, that would be cool, right? All those different things, great treasure. But it was like God was saying, you know what, that's one great treasure, but if I'm calling you to the priesthood, then for you, the priesthood will be an even bigger treasure chest, even more amazing. And it was like, so imagine like the one treasure chest like this, and then for me, if he was calling me to the priesthood, then it'd be like a Cadillac-sized treasure chest. To be married to the bride of Christ, the Catholic Church, who, by the way, is 2,000 years old almost, and still smoking red hot, okay? Yeah, the bride of Christ, beautiful. And then to be a dad, a spiritual dad, to not just 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or a dozen. I would have loved to have a huge family, you know, a dozen kids, biological kids, but actually as a priest, I could be a spiritual father to countless spiritual children. God kind of helped me to see that it's not so much that I'm just giving up this one treasure, which is what I'd been focusing on, can't give up marriage, can't give up marriage. It was more like I'm kind of trading up in a way. Because he's calling me to the priesthood, I'm trading one amazing, beautiful gift and giving it to God. And in return, he's given me an even more amazing gift. So one would make me happy, one would make me even more happy and more fulfilled. And so it kind of clicked, something clicked. It had been working in my heart for the last 8 or 9 years, you know, since 5th grade. And finally, God helped me to say yes. So I still can't understand what happened, but somehow, when I stepped into my car to go home for Christmas break, I got into my white Oldsmobile, which is a different car now. My friends now called it the grandmother car, right? But I was driving home in that. By the time I stepped in the car, I was expecting to be married one day, probably to my girlfriend at the time, after college. By the time I got out, though, 2 hours later, I knew that I was called to be a priest, and I'd finally said yes. And there was like pretty much no doubt left in my mind anymore. So it was a great grace that God gave me during that time. But there was a little sign, though, because I was at a New Year's party with all like the pastor and all the people at St. Mary's. It was a big parish party, and Father Evatt, the priest at the time, our pastor, he was standing there. My mom was there, and a few other. And he's like, "You know, Andrew might be a priest one day." And I was like, "You don't know the half of it, Father." Right? I thought to myself, but I kept it on the down low. I mean, remember, like in 5th grade, I started saying something, and then everybody didn't want to play with me on the playground. So I'm not going to make that mistake again, okay? And so I went back home to Clemson, and I was trying to work up the courage to talk to my girlfriend about it. It took me about 3 or 4 weeks. Finally, we talked, and I ended up having to explain to her, I think I'm called to be a priest, and I love you. But if I really love you, I've got to follow what I think God is calling me to. Because imagine if we kept dating and one day we get married. What if the whole time we were married, I'd always be wondering if I was called to be a priest? You know, we'd go to church as a family, and I'd be happy married to you and having our kids and everything, but I'd be sitting there at church, see the priest lift up the host, and I'd think, that should be me. Or maybe that was supposed to be me. Right? And I just can't date and get married and like have that doubt. I've got to follow this and at least see if God's really calling me to be a priest. And so we ended up having to separate, which was really tough. But if you're going to get dumped, I guess that's a good reason, you know. And she took it fairly well. But I ended up finally, after about 1.5 years, I started to apply to the Diocese of Charleston here in South Carolina. They finally accepted me. And so I left after 2 years at Clemson. It took about 6 years of seminary up in Columbus, Ohio. I finished up college up there, and then 4 years of theology. And then finally, in 2007, I was ordained a priest, and it was awesome. And I've now been a priest for almost 4 years now. Every day is an adventure, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I titled this talk, Peter Parker Becomes a Priest, okay? I love the Spider-Man stories. I love the movies. And he's just a normal guy that gets called to an amazing task, right? By the comic gods, I guess. And he is transformed and takes on this great responsibility. He's not perfect or anything. Well, that's like me. I'm just an ordinary guy, a normal guy, a big Ninja Turtle fan back in the day, you know? Normal kid. And I wasn't like praying every day, like levitating or nothing in my room. And God called me. It's not because I'm super holy or anything. It's just that was what He created me to do. And so my message is that each of you has got a calling from God, that He has planned from you from the beginning. He has created you with a specific way to reach heaven, so to speak. All the different vocations, the different callings are just pathways to heaven. Each of you are called to be saints. Each of you are called to be holy, to be close friends of Jesus and go to heaven one day. Bringing as many people as you can with you, right? And the different vocations are just the different paths that He calls each individual person to achieve that goal of becoming a saint. So for me, He ended up having His plan for me to be a saint by being a priest, by laying my life down for the people of God and serving them like Jesus served. For most of you, God's probably calling you to become a saint through the very beautiful calling of marriage. And this beautiful calling of laying down your life for your spouse and for your children, and as husband and wife, walking hand in hand to heaven together, helping your children go there with you. I mean, a beautiful calling. And some of you might be called to be a religious brother or sister. Again, an amazing path to give your life to God in a religious community, serving the community, serving the needs of others, teaching, doing evangelization, like the sisters here, evangelizing through their media. So all these different callings. And some of you might be maybe called to be a single person, to stay in the single state for your whole life and give your life to God in a special way. One of my favorite teachers in high school, Mr. Levert, he never married, and he always said in class, I just felt like God wasn't calling me to be married, but He's calling me to give my whole life to serving Him as a teacher. So those are the 4 main callings: single life, religious life, priesthood, and married life. And no matter what it is that He's calling you to, I just encourage you, to be open and just to say yes. Whatever it is He's calling you to. Lord, I don't know what You're calling me to. I'm not ruling anything out. I just want to do what You've created me to do, because that's what's going to make me most happy, most fulfilled. That's how I'm going to become a saint. That's how one day I'm going to rejoice with You and the saints forever in heaven. There's my talk. All right.